You look terrible. I want you to eat. I want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood big shot's gonna give you what you want.
It's too late. They start shooting in a week.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and a man in the comic industry that's been in the news lately for a lot of the right reasons is Todd McFarlane over at Image Comics. Of course, he is the creator of Spawn. He has got one of the hottest Kickstarter campaigns, associated with comics in a very long time. He's well over $1 million for his, retro vintage reimagining of his Spawn character, I believe from the 90s. And but he also recently had an interview with Forbes.com. I know Perch has kind of talked about it a bit on the channel here and there, but I want to talk about it a little bit more in depth, specifically 2 points that he makes in there. And here today to talk about it with me is my man, Yule Carter from Fantastic Comics. What's up, buddy?
Not much. I actually talked about Todd McFarlane last night in his Kickstarter. I am very impressed with how well that's doing. It's amazing.
Yeah, so Todd McFarlane is one of those personalities in comics that is a unifying force. Whether you're on this side or that side, generally speaking, most people agree Todd McFarlane's the man, and I like him. He's got that kind of personality. That's the way he projects himself, and he kind of treats everyone well. So he's the kind of person that could actually bring people together and really help heal the industry once things kind of get back to normal. And he had some interesting things to talk about in this Forbes.com article. Like I said, we're going to talk about two of them. The first one being, this is his quote. He says, "I think the industry needs a consistent message. Whatever that message is, right or wrong, we need to be consistent, even if we have to adjust it. But we really need to speak with one voice, not 4 or 5 different publishers running 4 or 5 different programs and methodologies." And then he also said that, if he were in charge of comics, he'd want Marvel, DC, Image Comics, and Dark Horse, to kind of stand as a unified front. And then he also, speaking of working together, then once this is over, speaking about the current crisis with COVID, coronavirus, we can do 3 to 5 events to get people a reason to come back into the stores. And maybe we can coordinate things, as far as timing, so each company gets a turn in the spotlight. I got to be honest here. I agree with this 100%. It feels like you have 5 ships going in 5 different directions once you start talking about the companies up at the top. And there definitely needs to be more coordination and more crosstalk as far as what the plans are and strategies for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with Todd McFarlane as far as there has to be a unifying voice. There has to be something where they all agree on something. If we're talking about the publishers, definitely. And then there's also the aspect of stores and retailers having to get together to maybe have a conversation about what needs to happen also. There always seems to be people that are kind of out for themselves, and maybe not out for themselves, but only looking out for themselves or only worried about themselves because of the bubble that they live in. And I'm not sure if I agree that Marvel or DC will ever want to team up with Image and Dark Horse. I don't know. Marvel has shown its willingness, even though they've been owned by other people over the years, to do kind of what they want to do when they want to do it, and everybody else be damned. And it is a nice idea to believe that, these guys could get together. I just don't know if it can. And I mean, I would be very curious. I would be very interested to see what these guys would come up with, because I think in the end, if we come back to normal, it's just going to be business as usual. And this whole thing is going to fall on deaf ears overall.
So I do think when we come back, the industry is going to be changed dramatically. But I do think, we will see the publishers themselves kind of having their own individual strategies and not really coordinating. Mm-hmm. But if they were coordinating, if you think about like the NFL, we're talking like a multi-billion-dollar, industry. You have multiple billionaire owners of those teams. I think there's 32 teams right now, but they all work together for a common good because they're all in the same industry. They're vying for the best talent, and they want to put the best product on the field, but they're all playing by the exact same rules and working together, in unison, to elevate the league. And I think that's one of the reasons, the NFL and a lot of the sports things are really profitable and they work really well because they're managed well, as an overall unit. But we don't really have like that unifying voice in comics to where there can be one strategy that says, okay, Marvel, you're going to do 3 events this year. DC's going to do 2. Let's schedule them around each other so we're not overlapping and maybe cutting sales on stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Todd's talking about getting 4 companies, the biggest companies involved, but let's be real about it. Image isn't a company like Marvel and DC is, even though they're the number 3 company. And including Dark Horse is really not important in this conversation. It's really talking about Marvel and DC getting together and agreeing on how they are going to market their books to the rest of the world, and like you said, maybe not shoving everything all at the same time. It used to just be summer events, and then it was bi-weekly books during the summer. And then it was, oh, well, here's this winter event, and it's going to extend all year long and all this other stuff. And DC's doing the same thing. Comic book publishers, they've always seemed to want to operate rogue from each other. And, you heard things about comic creators talking about unions because of not having money later on in lives and not being represented fully when they're losing their character creations and stuff like that. And if there was a union, then they would be. But again, you have to get Marvel, DC, every other comic book publisher involved for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the comic industry, and it's, when you start reading into it, they have a proud history of really screwing over some of the most transcendent creators they've ever had. If you talk about the creators of Superman, Batman, and and creator rights and things like that, if they have a terrible legacy, from Marvel to DC, and
Todd McFarlane was on the forefront of separating from Marvel for those very reasons. It's funny to see him talking about unifying when he was one of the most destructive people in comic books to some degree. Him and his buddies.
Well, yeah, when the Image 7, left, they basically decimated Marvel Comics. It was almost their entire X-Men line. Their 2 biggest Spider-Man artists, those are all their biggest titles. They're all leaving at the exact same time. They definitely they left an impression. I'll give them that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, when I say destroying, they didn't destroy anything. Obviously, they shone a light in a direction that a lot of the major companies didn't want you to do that to. Creators' rights. That you can actually build your star and move it somewhere else and make a financial gain. The Marvel and DC really kind of tamped down their creating superstars working in their comic books during that time.
Yeah, if you think about Todd McFarlane and his legacy, not only was he his legacy of perseverance, just with the amount of times he submitted and he finally got in there and he became one of the transcendent Spider-Man artists, but he goes over to Image Comics. He starts Spawn. That's the flagship series of Image Comics, still going to this day, broke the record for the longest creator-owned series in the history of the industry. But then you think about his toy line. When you look at toy lines as far as action figures, those are like the primo toys that are available. They are the cream of the crop because everything that Todd McFarlane does, he wants it to be the best.
Mm-hmm. You have to. Anybody that likes toys out there has a lot of thanks to give Todd McFarlane, because when he started his, and not just superhero toys. He's done all sorts of He brought baseball toys and NFL and all that other stuff. There's a quality and a care to these figures that get made that wasn't in action figures at the time. We have a huge debt to give Todd McFarlane if you are a lover of toys.
So that wasn't all he had to say in that Forbes interview, and you should definitely all read it if you get an opportunity to. There's a lot of very interesting stuff. But the other thing that he talked about, and Perch has really hit on this, on the channel before, is when he's talking about this idea that all comic production or distribution should shut down, and that's with respect to digital. And this is what he has to say about that. He says, "I don't agree with retailers. Doing nothing can't be the answer. If all we do is stand still and hold our breath, how does that improve what we're doing now?" And then he goes on to talk about Spawn a little bit, but then he comes back and he says, "We don't want our customers to break that habit. Consumers will be filling their time somehow. Why let a competitor fill that with streaming media or games? We need to fill it. We as the companies have the power to make that happen. Remember back in 2011, retailers didn't want digital comics to come out on the same day and date as print comics, thinking it would doom the industry. They were wrong. It helped sales. I'm somewhat on board with him, and then I somewhat disagree with him. I think if Marvel and DC and Image were releasing all their comics on digital, it would create a logistics nightmare on the back end. So if this lasts for, even if it's 8 weeks, only 2 months, 8 weeks of back issue comics coming in for your customers to have to come in and get, the collectors are going to want their physical copies, but that's all coming in at the same time as the new comics that are coming in. It would be a nightmare for retailers. Obviously, you'll know better than that. But I do agree with him that there needs to be something in there for comic readers to be going in and buying that's new. It can't just be Gotham High. The only thing that I can think of that's been released the last 2 weeks as far as a comic book is that, Batman, The Adventures Continues. Other than that, there's really nothing out there from Image, DC, or Marvel outside of trades. And something needs to be in there to fill the void.
Yeah, doing nothing's wrong. I agree with that. And he has said something that I've said. There's a mentality about collecting that has to keep continuing, or else people are going to, drop off. I hesitate to say that too often because it sounds like drugs. But
it kind of is, man.
Comics are a crack.
Weekly comic hit.
Exactly. Yeah, mainline that. I guess that's what digital is, mainlining it. I don't know if there's a correlation between digital sales to sales in the store. I have seen it though. I have seen where Marvel Comics, their app that you can buy for like $60 a year or something like that. They will release things and then they won't release the entirety of those things. And as a result, I have been able to sell the physical copies. So that's a direct correlation where I have made a sale because of digital. But overall, I don't see a whole lot of people coming in and buying because they bought digital. I think digital is, for me personally, if I was going to look at it, I would use it more personally as like being able to go back and read back issues. So if you have an event that's coming up, maybe make the issues that pertain to it from the past available, which would then drive sales for entire trades collections of that story, and maybe sell the books going forward. But Todd McFarlane's talked about, your main titles like a Spider-Man, a Batman, a Spawn, and making those digitally. And he's even talked about making them free, like 3 months, 4 months, something like that. Mm-hmm. If he's right about the drug mentality of comic books, then if you get people hooked digitally, my only thought is if you're getting them hooked digitally, why will they care about physical copies going forward?
So this is what Todd had to say about that. We have an industry that's built around weekly gatherings, conventions, where people come to the conventions and get their book signs, not their iPads. They need something physical. Mm-hmm. That's never going away. So that's where like his explanation about physical not going away permanently. One thing that I think is an inhibitor for what Todd is asking for is Comixology kind of being the biggest digital platform and DC and Marvel not really having anything to do with that. I think that they're going to need to work together, maybe even with Diamond, and have their own reader that is more user-friendly, that they can both, have equal stake in, to where they're not getting scalped for 70% of digital sales when they go through Amazon. I imagine that's one of the big reasons, but there has to be money to pay for something like that, and I'm shocked that they haven't done it already.
Yeah, again, we're talking about these two companies actually getting together and doing something that would benefit them, maybe benefit everybody, and they don't do it, and they haven't done it. We see change in comic books all the time, whether it's new number ones, better paper, people from the outside coming in, characters changing. All these things happen in comic books all the time, but we're so resistant to other things. And maybe like the methodology of printing and everything comes out weekly, everything comes out monthly. It's really hard to want to change something when like it's going to disrupt everything so much. And I think that's why we haven't seen Marvel and DC get together as far as publishing or digital platforms. It's why we haven't seen Diamond go and tell DC and Marvel and the other companies that we have to change our deals. DC has, we're exploring avenues and how to distribute our comics. Are you? What are you doing? And I think it's that same week in, week out, life that we lead as comic book fans, retailers, and publishers. We just are set in our own existence, and it is really hard to try and affect any real change.
There would definitely be a reason for that platform if it was a DC Marvel joint venture to be open for everything, because where do DC Marvel get their new talent? They get them from Image, they get them from Boom, they get them from Dark Horse, they get them from Vault. All these places where they're publishing their stories, or you're getting art out there. I know when I see a new artist or a new writer that's on a Disney on a DC character or a Marvel character that I like, I will go out there and I search out that work. So if that stuff is available on this platform, I would go in, mark it down to $1. I will go buy those just so I can see what this person's all about and be ready for when that comic book comes out. Because I'm a comic book reader and I'm crazy like that. I want to know what's coming up. I don't like new things, but I want to get excited for them. Isn't that weird?
No, that's not weird at all. Oh man, what excites me the most in comic books is when somebody that's so outside the mainstream comes to do something in the mainstream. I'm like, oh, what are we going to get? When I was a kid and Bill Sienkiewicz was going to come on to New Mutants, and I had been reading Moon Knight and I've been reading New Mutants, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to move from this book to that. That was one of the most exciting things at that time for me. And yeah, you do get hyped for that. And as far as wanting to go to the comic store and wanting to go to conventions and everything, I agree. That is where we get together. The only problem is that we're in this Corona world that we live in, and that might be a long time before it really happens. So again, they're going to have to get together and figure out what they're going to do as far as this digital is concerned.
Definitely, because a lot of their talent, whether it be art talent, writing talent, or freelancers, most of them aren't exclusive, and they are taking it the worst because convention season isn't out there. They're not out there, maybe getting paid for some autographs, selling some original artwork, networking, getting some new deals. So there's a lot of people that are being affected in ways maybe we're not always considering when we just think about the comic shop and things of that nature. But we're right up on the end of the time here. I want to say thank you very much. I think this was a very informative conversation about Todd McFarlane and his thoughts about how the industry should improve once things come back online. Did you have anything else that you needed to say before we wrap this up?
Todd McFarlane he's definitely a guy that likes comic books. He is really interested in the industry, and I think really only has the best when he's talking about it in mind. I just want to remind everybody, he's not always the most business savvy person. He has lost money. He has done things for comic books that has cost him money. And it's not always, sometimes when you're in there and you got ideas, they're not always the ones that you need to actually, make something succeed. But he has been very successful in the past, and he is very successful right now also. That's it.
Well, he's also a unifying voice that I think people can rally behind and maybe be a leadership figure or somebody that can get things done or get people to talk, which I think is the most important thing.
Yeah.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you later.
All right, man. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.